just sets auto at this point,
Okay.
so you don't have to do anything crazy. Oh yeah, let's set password.
Okay.
You can worry about your.
Going to get started. My name is Mykl Roventine, Director of Social Media Breakfast, Minneapolis, St. Paul. Welcome this morning. We're happy you're joining us on this Thursday morning. Hashtag, going to review a few things that have been up there. Wi-Fi, if you didn't see it already, it's been up there for a little while. I don't see anybody frantically typing in numbers, so that's good. I want to thank our annual and in-kind sponsors, St. Kate's MBA, Luther Automotive Dealerships. Can you give them a big round of applause? Yeah, there we go. I'd also like to thank Stanley's Northeast Barroom. They're our bacon sponsor. Verizon, 504 Studios. Skelly Video Productions, Sterling Crossford, SMBMSP, and Muddy Paws Cheesecake. Brunelle. Thank you.
Thank you. I'll try my best.
I like to turn the mic around.
Okay.
In that sense. So we are very glad to have you here. You've been on this stage a couple times before doing case studies and panels and things like that. We figured it was high time to get you up here and get the inside scoop.
Okay.
All right.
By the way, your July event, the case study from Fallon, I happen to know from the person who's presenting it that it'll be really good. So you should show up here. You'll learn a lot more in July than you will today. Sorry.
Let's keep setting
or maybe more
really
practical.
low.
Yeah.
Yes. Well, okay. So you mentioned you're more used to being on the other side of the stage, interviewing people. So conversations about the future of advertising. Mm-hmm. 10 years.
Right.
10 years and oh my gosh, what is it? What's the stat here? 26 guests.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Tell me how this started.
So, conversations about the future of advertising are CATFOA, an off again, on again, always in beta speaker series. Came out of a class I was teaching at the Minneapolis College of Art and Design. A woman named Nancy Rice, who helped found a little agency called Fallon. It was called Fallon McGilligan Rice. And if you ever get a chance to hang out with Nancy, you should. She's a legend and taught me a lot. And she was teaching at MCAD. And Nancy's one of those people that when she calls you, you ain't saying no to her. You can try. And I pushed her off for about a year and then, found myself teaching at MCAD, and for which I'm eternally grateful. And in the course of putting together the class, we decided to call it The Future of Advertising because we thought it's like clickbait. The students will love that. And they signed up, and we realized we needed guests to come in and talk because just listening to me for 18 sessions was going to get really boring. And we had really smart people in this community. That one of the things that's great about the Twin Cities is we've got a wealth of really smart, really intelligent, really thoughtful people. So the construct of the class was to bring in a lot of guest speakers. Turns out at the time, there was a little pool of money, a little pot of money that had been donated by someone in the community to MCAD to pay for guest speakers, and so airfare and hotel. And so, lucky us, we got to access that pool of money and bring people in from out of town to add to the mix of smart people here in the Twin Cities. So that was back in 2008. Jan Leth was the first speaker guy. It was, at the time, he had one of those titles like Global Chairman of Digital for Ogilvy and Mather, riding a carpet, flying a carpet around the world, bestowing magic on brands. And Jan is now retired and lives in Maine. But anyway, so we had a chance to bring in really smart people and expose them to the students so they would go and speak at MCAD, and then they would come and do an event at a place like this. So that was 10 years ago, 27 speakers. We've had, local people and people from out of town. Last week we just had Jeff Kling, who left Fallon as chief creative, come in and talk, and that was great. Next month we're going to have a guy named Sung Chang. Sung and I worked together at Ogilvy, back in 2006. He's it's one of those exalted titles with too many acronyms in it. SVP, whatever. But he's essentially in charge of loyalty and digital for McCann. We were just chatting the other day. He spent a week in China, then he was in Cannes, and now he's back in New York. So he will have a lot of perspective about the world that's out there outside of Minneapolis and what many large brands are doing vis-a-vis the future of advertising. So, and honestly, the reason that speaker series continues to prevail is because other people want it to. I'm very fortunate that there's a woman named Yulia Krevier who's on the board of MIMA who called me up and said, hey, you used to do this speaker series. When are you doing it again? And I said, you tell me. And she said, great, we want to help promote it and sponsor it, and I said, fantastic. So I benefit from the fact that this community that we live in is filled with wonderful volunteers and wonderful people who have said, hey, I want to help, I want to participate, I want to instigate, so that's why it exists.
What are some of your, I won't ask you to pick a favorite speaker, but what are some of your favorite moments over the years?
Well, I don't remember any specific quotes. For me, the benefit of an interview like that, hopefully it's entertaining. Hopefully there's some sort of insight you walk away going, well, I hadn't thought of that before. That was useful. We've had some people who've come in who've been not interesting and not entertaining, and I feel really bad about that. But someone like Jeff, he just says he's got some strong opinions about things. So for me, the success of any one of those events is if you felt like, wow, there was some emotional weight to it, and whatever the guest said something interesting. I mean, the bar is, look at all the great interviewers that exist, whether it's, Letterman or anyone else, who can do a really great interview and elicit a really great response. So that's the challenge. It's really weird to see a picture of yourself.
It's very, very big brother.
Projected. Yeah. What's up?
Well, I've always loved the conversational aspect of it.
Yeah.
I mean, it's right in the name, but it's nice to hear these kind of keynote type people just kind of talking off the cuff. So that's fantastic. Let's go back. You have done a variety of things over the past almost 30 years in marketing.
That's right, I'm old.
Yeah. What gets you up in the morning? What still excites you about marketing and advertising?
Tired. And I think that's all euphemisms for experienced. I think the key to life is being curious. I think waking up and realizing there's a lot I don't know, and that I want to know, and I get curious about what's happening in art, what's happening at the Walker, but then to kind of say, well, the Walker's one place, what's happening at Mia, but what's happening in Paris or Tokyo in terms of art. So that I just want to know. It's kind of art is kind of like if we're all canaries in a coal mine, art's one of the ways in which we can get a sense of what might be coming around the corner. What are we feeling as a population of humans? So I wake up and I'm curious about what's happening out there in places like art. I've learned that what's happening out there in places like politics, less interesting, because it's just, it's sugar. It tastes great, and then you're like, what happened to my waistline? So, less interested in that sort of day-to-day stuff. I'm also just kind of interested in what are people making. So I get curious about patents. I get curious about what's happening in technology in terms of what is a tool or a utility that someone's made that improves someone else's life. I subscribe to a bunch of different newsletters that either track what's happening in the patent space or in the kind of technical innovation space, mostly just to kind of marvel at. My biggest takeaway is, wow, humans make a lot of stuff. We whether they're in Africa or Europe or Asia or here or Silicon Valley, we're constantly inventing new ways of making things simpler or easier. And that's both comforting, but also in some cases, it causes me to think, okay, how might that technology that I just read about, some sort of maybe, I don't know, AR, experience that someone made that they're applying to hospitals. I wonder how that might be applicable to the things I'm working on today. So I wake up, get a cup of coffee, I read through the newsletters. I guess my sort of, getting out of bed, my position is one of curiosity. So, and I don't know where that came from. That's just kind of the nature of genes and genetics and family, so I'm grateful for that. But that's, I guess that's kind of my thrust is like, what's going to happen next and how might we leverage it or benefit from it? Yeah, that's kind of the default.
We were talking before this about the business of being an ideas person.
Right. Yep. So I'm a writer by trade, got into the business in 91, 92, sort of figured out, I'm what you call a copywriter. That's the label that suits me best. 92, 93, got my first job, full-time job in St. Louis, Missouri. And at some point, probably in the first 5-10 years of being in advertising, and in about 96, 97, the internet is existing, but it's finally becoming something that we all are kind of like required to pay attention to. So I built my first website in 94 because you could. Oh, there's this stuff called HTML, and look, you can make a thing, and it's other people can look at it. Interesting. So realizing that at some point it occurred to me that like, there's a structure around me being a writer. There's someone who makes sure I have a computer. There's someone who makes sure that I have a desk to sit at. There's operations, right? You start to realize there's a whole financial structure around, in a business, around me writing silly headlines for a bank. It's the, when you're young and you're starting out and they tell you, hey, you get to write billboards for a credit card and it's got a really low interest rate. And then you write the headline, check out this sexy little number. And you think to yourself, I am so clever. The gods are smiling on me, How stupid, right? But, so you're an ideas person, whether you're a designer, art director, strategist. At some point I realized there's a whole operational structure behind me that's making sure my computer works, making sure I get paid, paying for my health insurance, and for the rest of us to be in rooms that are air conditioned, So that business, there's a business structure of being an ideas person. But then you start to think about it a little bit further and you go, wait, before I wrote that stupid headline, someone had to develop the assignment. They had to write a creative brief. Before a creative brief got written, someone on the client side had to decide, we need more people to sign up for our credit card. Before someone decided that, they had to have a credit card in the first place. And you start to realize all these things are connected and that there is a business that influences me at the point of starting to write headlines. And so that, once that occurred to me, and I feel kind of foolish, it only took me a decade to realize that there's a business around being an artist. Once that became clear, then I got really curious about all of those functions because let's just say this. Most creative briefs, how many of you are writers or designers or art directors? How many of you make things? Okay. How many, so of those of you who just raised your hands, how many of you would say 50% of your creative briefs are awesome? Okay, no hands went up. How many of you would say less than 1% of your creative briefs are awesome, right? Maybe. So 99% of creative briefs that we get exposed to are not awesome. That's the business of creativity. That's the business of being an ideas person. And that's when I started to realize, why am I struggling? Why are we, as the creative department, struggling? Why are we upset? Why are we frustrated with the situation we're in? You start to realize, the inputs, the briefing, and then the inputs that went into the briefing, the business itself, the product itself, the scenario the whole construct, there are flaws, there are errors, there are things that are broken. And then I start to say, why can't I try to fix that? Why isn't my opinion, I think my opinions should be heard further up the river, earlier in the process. And so that, when I talk about the business of ideas people, I'm both talking about all of the actions which occur before any one of us have to create, but also the act of creation itself it's operational, it's political, and then we have an idea that's in front of people who didn't come up with that idea, so maybe account people or media people, and then clients who have to approve it. All of those interactions are psychological, they are behavioral, they are political, and there's a business of that. So, what is the room? How is the room set up? When I'm pitching to you, is the room clean? Did we clean it up and organize it? Is our presentation coherent and clear? Are the fewest possible slides? Are we listening to you? Are we reading your language? There are all these mechanical components that support or hinder ideas existing in the world. And that's the stuff I started to get curious about, because it's not hard to come up with ideas. We do it all the time. But why are most briefs horrible, and why is there so much garbage being produced? I would argue it's because the business of ideas itself is broken, and that's the stuff I want to look into, and that's the stuff that interests me the most.
Absolutely.
I can just keep talking.
No,
so
no,
you're gonna.
I
told you. You're gonna have to cut me off.
You're good. I haven't even thought about that yet. So for those of you who didn't raise your hands, let's try to wrap our arms around what you guys do. So marketing, advertising, raise your hand. Okay.
Should be everybody.
Wow.
How many of you are strategists? Consider yourself strategy people. We got a few of you. So. Yeah. How many of you work client side, marketer side? About half. Okay.
Okay, sure. In light of that, what's your current take? I don't want to say on the state of marketing, but the space right now, having lived in it and seen it change so much, where do you think we are right now?
We exist.
Okay, thank you. Next question.
Yeah. I mean, it's hard to say. Like, that's more of an evolutionary question to say, like, are we aware of who we are and where we are in this point in time versus what, the past? We were talking a little bit about what the future might be. We're all just guessing. None of us can truly know, obviously, unless we're traveling back in time, which maybe that could happen. That'd be cool. So to know what the future is you're really only good as your antenna, your ability to listen and kind of and sense, and the wealth or lack of wealth of experiences that you've had. Mm-hmm. It's I don't remember the name for this. It's a behavioral or sort of biological thing that we do as humans. So we grew up in caves, and then we were in the savannas, and we were roaming tribes. Anyone read *Sapiens*, Yuval Harari's book *Sapiens*? Fantastic book. So we've only been really doing this for the last 70,000 years, but humans as a species have been around for millions of years. So what happened 70,000 years ago that caused us to create licensed legal corporations, right? And so when you think about where we're at in time and what we're doing in marketing, we're continually making it up. We're trying new things. So I like the time we're in. I'm really glad that this isn't the 1970s in terms of, let's just say, like, after the whole era of Mad Men and we got used to the idea that, oh yeah, ideas would be good. Then we got into the 70s, we had the oil crunch, and we had the 80s. Sure, there was interesting content, art was happening, but the kind of the business of marketing and advertising was pretty, it wasn't, there were inventive ideas, but we didn't have mobile technology. We didn't have interaction occurring. We didn't have 5-second video. We didn't have drones. So we certainly today, what's exciting about today is that there are so many ways in which we can experiment. Mm-hmm. And we can kind of cross-reference and we can try. I think it's exciting to live and to work in a time when there's so much opportunity.
Absolutely. Can we rely on the same things?
Can we what?
Can we rely on the same things that we thought we could, say, a few years ago?
Of course. I mean, I think, strategy and measurement and rigor still matter. You know, what's the formula? I think there was a guy at Coca-Cola, someone will correct me, it's the 80, 70, 20, 10 scenario. So you spend 70% of your money on things you know work. You can prove to yourself in some way that $1 in equals more than $1 out. So that's 70% of your marketing. 10%, and let's just say you've got, it's $100. Let's just say your entire marketing budget's $100 to make the example easier. Then you'd spend $10 on 10 $1 experiments. So because if you lose $1 out of 100, what's the harm, right? So 10 $1 experiments, trying wild and crazy things, and then you're holding on to, what do we got left, $20? Holding on to 20% of your budget to operationalize the experiments that work. So 70% of your time, your money, your resources are spent on things you know work. And you're going to try to make them more efficient, of course. You're going to start to realize that's trending down, so let's abandon it. And then you're going to spend 10% of your time, money, resources on experiments. And you're going to go, what about that? You know, let's try something crazy and see if it works. Because if it works, then we've got a pool of money, we've got some resources to bake that into the ongoing 70%. So in me, that's kind of a way of thinking about how to staff, how to budget, how to allocate time and resources.
Another piece from our earlier conversation, you talked about the unprecedented amount.
Would you like me to hold the microphone here or here? Down, like here is good? Okay.
Molly's pointing at me.
Oh, is it? It's you.
I'm
they want you.
Oh. Okay.
Okay.
You sound great. No, you talked about
thanks, Phil.
The status quo is being upset at an unprecedented rate. Does that ring a bell?
Yeah, I maybe it's just the fact that I think we're more aware of more voices. So one of the awesome things about the internet, it's enabled everybody, right? So your neighbor has as much kind of ability, whether he's got the time or the passion, you know, but your neighbor, she or he, has as much ability to put stuff out into the world as General Mills, right? And you look at, you know, this is the whole realm of influencers. You know, an influencer is nothing if not someone who's got some amount of time on their hands and passion. And they've managed to convince other people that that's worth something, that's worth being paid for. So, you know, so we have more people speaking, more voices are being heard, all of which is, I think, a net positive. But the more that we are kind of aware of, I'm aware of what you're doing and you're aware of what I'm doing, and the more that we're starting to hear different voices, I think the more that we can kind of get a general sense of dissatisfaction. But I would argue dissatisfaction with the status quo is a good thing. You know, granted, running water, consistent electricity, persistent internet connection, that status quo, let's try to maintain that. Like peace, peace would be good. But railing against banal, boring stuff, you know, like, yes, let's fight against that status quo. I'm all in favor of fighting against. Okay. I mean, if you're coming to work and you don't know why you're coming to work, if your brand is just, we're shipping content and we really passionately can't tell you why, we can tell you numerically why, that's a status quo I would really want to poke some holes in and ask kind of like, in addition to you've got numbers that tell you it's, quote, working, emotionally, why are you doing it? I think it's important to have that sense of, because that's what builds culture, and that's what builds belief, and that's what gets people to work harder than you can maybe pay them for.
Okay. Let me get another show of hands here for the marketers in the room. Length of time you've been in the field. So let's go 1 to 3 years. Raised your hand. Okay. 3 to 5. Okay. More than 5.
Ancient people. Yes.
Okay. What kind of advice?
Jedis.
What kind of advice do you have for those people starting out in their first couple of years?
Well, it's the advice you're going to get from, anyone. And just subscribe to Gary Vaynerchuk. He'll tell you what to do. I love Gary, right? I've already kind of said it. Just be curious. You're here already. You've won. The fact that you're out in the world mingling with other people, having a conversation about stuff. Great. That's an achievement. I look back on myself and my early career. Okay, so one of the things I should have done that I didn't do, it's keep the business cards. I didn't necessarily foster relationships with coworkers and clients that would have benefited me 10 years later. One of the interesting things about the world we live in now, someone said this to me, is like our children won't have the luxury of being able to forget every person they met. That's interesting, right? To think about the idea that I can't remember the names of anyone I went to grade school with, but Facebook will remind me. LinkedIn will help me remind me of everyone I've worked with if I've chosen. So leverage that. Think about, you're only as good, I think, as the relationships you can create with people. And so advice to self looking back first couple of years, think about relationships. You have a responsibility to nurture them, to grow them, to say, I'm not really doing anything Thursday and Friday, 2 weeks out. I do like that person that I've been working with. I'm going to set up a coffee. It takes effort. You got to go do that stuff. It's like in the same way that, they tell you got to brush your teeth, you got to go to the gym, you got to get enough sleep, yada, yada, yada. You got to watch Westworld. Go out and socialize with people. I think that's turning that into a habit is something I wished I had done earlier in my career.
You had mentioned the value of seeing others' processes.
Oh, yeah.
When we talked as well.
Well, I've got opinions. We all do, right, about how things should be, the way in which we should work together. The first time I freelanced, so I was working in the business like 5-6 years, and then I finally got fired, let's be clear. And so I find myself freelancing. And I was fortunate that an art director I was working with, we sat down, 2 strangers at an agency, we're going to freelance, and he said to me, hey, here's how I work best. He told me, I would like it if you and I made sure that we understood this brief together for a few hours, and then I need to be away from you. I need to spend some time alone, what we now call deep work, thinking about this by myself, and then let's get back together, and then we'll kind of ping pong back and forth, alone together. For someone to give me the gift of telling me their process, I was like, wow, there's a way there's a methodology, right? And since then, I've always been curious. So like when I meet with someone for the first time and we're going to work together, it's like, hey, just help me understand optimally, best circumstances, what's your process? How do you work? Half the time people are like, wait, what? And then they realize, oh, I do have a process and I do have opinions about it. We all do. So to like have that conversation is helpful, right? And I would argue even with people you've been working with for a long time, if you're sensing like, why is there friction here? Why is there tension? Maybe the question to ask is sort of like, what about our process is or isn't working for you? That simple question can alleviate so much tension. Like I've found out, I'm doing some work now, there's some people I work with who really don't like email. I love email. They don't. I got to stop loving email and start seeking them out one-to-one and talking in person. That's a more effective process for them. So I think at a higher level, it's just the basic stuff of understanding that we're all entitled to our own process, but it would also really benefit us to understand that we're not alone and that other people have their own, and we should talk about that. It'll make life easier, especially if to someone you're like married to. It's really critical.
It's a great headline yesterday when Slack was down. Slack is down and employees had to actually speak to each other or something like that.
Yeah, right?
You touched on something there. I'm going to put you on the spot here.
Okay.
Feel free to tell me that you don't want to answer. What?
In front of a large group of people.
Yes.
Okay.
No, this is, I think you're up to the challenge here. Is there a failure that you really came out of learning? Obviously, we all learn from failure, but is there a failure you'd be comfortable talking about?
Oh, sure.
I love hearing about that from
Okay,
people.
so I've failed dozens of times. I mean, come on, I've been divorced twice. Let's just start there. I make mistakes all the time, interpersonal mistakes. I make judgment mistakes. My 11 and 12-year-old would argue I am failing consistently every single day. And they're not wrong. And so the question isn't really, I'll get to the failure example, but I think it's, the real thing is, what can I, Tim, learn as a result of that misstep, that trip, that abject failure? Can you learn from it? And can you change? Are you willing to change? Are you willing to make amends? Especially for yourself. Mistakes. I ran my own company for 6 years. One of the mistakes I did was I hired some expensive people without a confirmed contract with the client. We were pitching work. We were pretty sure we were going to win it, and we were pretty sure we were going to retain the client we had. So we hired 2 people because it just seemed like we had to do it at that time. And then not only did we not win the new business, we lost one of our significant clients. So that was an error. Don't hire people unless you've got the money to pay for them. And then the second error is don't keep them on staff and keep paying them and not pay yourself. So I was, I look back and go, well, maybe that seems really obvious to a lot of people, but when you're running your own company for the first time, you get blinded emotionally. Your emotions blind you to so many things which are clear to anyone on the outside. But now I know. Now I know what not to do, and I'm grateful for that opportunity. And, no one died. No one got hurt. I mean, it was just me and my pocketbook. So, good lesson there. Most of the mistakes I've made have been my ego thinking I'm right and that I've got this figured out and I'm going to tell you. And then I discover that not only am I not right, there's a whole host of circumstances and contexts that I was blind to, and I'm really at fault here. And so, as the years have accumulated, I just learning to be patient, learning to listen more than I talk, and trying to understand that the other person has a valid point of view. It's easy. It's easy to make mistakes. We all make them. The question is, what do you do as a result?
Absolutely. We were talking about trends earlier,
yes.
But I loved the way you framed marketing and advertising. This was the plumbing conversation. Do you remember this? Could you share that?
Right. Okay. So think of, all right, the example is that marketing is a house. And so you've got plumbing and electrical and sewer, and the systems that keep the house functioning. That's paid search. That's kind of like social listening. That's kind of your automated, a lot of your automated processes that I think you need, even from small to large, scaling in some way. You need to be flowing, if you will, with your audiences, your customers, B2B, B2C, whatever. That's the stuff which, is increasingly becoming automated, is increasingly being handled by, cognitive intelligence or computation, not cognitive, computational intelligence, AI. So I think that those things, are requiring less and less of human interaction, which frees us up to kind of sit back and kind of listen more and pay attention more and to kind of address larger scale problems, like, hey, maybe our product sucks, or, hey, maybe our membership criteria is too cumbersome, or, hey, maybe we should move our offices, I'm also realizing that I don't think I'm answering your question, so why don't you reframe it again, and I'll try.
You were getting there. Yeah. I don't know where we fell off there, but the concept of marketing being the plumbing compared to advertising being the other stuff.
Oh, no. I think advertising it's all part of a system, right? Mm-hmm. So you have low cost, easily automated systems, broadly speaking, search, social listening. You can, to some degree, set it and forget it. That's not to say you shouldn't pay attention to it, mm-hmm. But unlike designing a new product, unlike, say, most sort of designing a storefront, or discerning why is a certain audience segment behaving a certain way, those are unique, very contextual, circumstances that require individuals spending long periods of time talking, versus the stuff that we can kind of automate and forget. Like, none of us spend any time thinking about how our clothes get cleaned. We just put them in the washing machine or give them to someone and they get cleaned, right? We're not laboring thread by thread, shirt by shirt, item by item, meticulously washing them by hand, unless we're obsessive compulsive, right? So we don't think about that stuff. We just set it and forget it. So I think we're freeing ourselves as humans to focus on things, higher order elements. Like, so we were talking with Jeff Kling last week. His whole argument is, what's the core purpose of the company? Like, why does your agency exist that differentiates it from another agency? That's a really hard question to answer. And it's not, what are our deliverables, or we make websites, or we make TV spots, Who are you as a company? Who are you as a collective of people that make stuff? Same is true of corporations, right? Whether you're any one of the, 16, 19 global headquarters here in this market. Who are you as a company? Why do you have offices and people? Why do you have, why do you keep showing up? I think a lot of us have just we assume, well, it's because we make butter, or because we make tape, or because we make cereal, or, we make bacon. That's not why the company exists. And I do think that, like, we need, as marketers, to kind of keep an eye on that higher order purpose space and think about it. There are, of course, plenty of jobs in marketing and advertising where it is about keeping the machine running. It is about making sure that the algorithms are doing what the algorithms are supposed to do, that we are creating, hey, we need 17 landing pages. They're all slightly different. They all need copy. They all need tweaked images. Okay, that's work for production artists and writers, et cetera, et cetera. But that sort of work exists, and it's important. But we also have more time now to think about, like, why is the company here today? If you have a 100-year-old company, you can't possibly operate the way you did 100 years ago. You'd go out of business, writing things out by hand on ledgers, pricing things, So we recognize that it's been 100 years, and technology has changed things. Therefore, the way we think about the purpose of the company should change too.
You touched on this a little earlier. I want to bring it back. The impact of behavioral psychology.
Yeah, and this is just sort of recently for me. Again, it's reading books, reading blogs, listening to podcasts. There's a guy in London named Rory Sutherland. You might have seen him on. There's a TED Talk called "Confessions of an Ad Man." Rory, R-O-R-Y, Sutherland. And Rory's one of those like British guys, wears an ascot, went to Cambridge, is ridiculously intelligent, has a fabulous accent. And he started out in the direct marketing space, writing direct mail, 200-word letters and things like that. And he's very keen on looking at evolutionary psychology and behavioral psychology and sort of the Richard Thaler, Daniel Kahneman kind of behavioral economics space, and the language of those thinkers as a better system for understanding how advertising and marketing works. So, I transcribed a podcast that Rory did with a guy named Paul McNamee. You can find it on Medium. And it'll give you a sense of what Rory's talking about. But his point is, in marketing and advertising, we're sort of suffering from the Dilbert scenario, right? Like anyone who's an engineer meets us, I work in marketing and advertising, and the disdain is apparent. You are an idiot. I'm an engineer. Or I'm a financial person. I do something serious. I do something measurable. I got a PhD. Anyone who's in marketing or design or writing, it's like those are the arts, and they are a waste, right? So that's the Dilbert construct. And so Rory's point of view is, well, let's not use the language. Let's not talk about shares and impressions and awareness, which are all vague concepts. Let's use the language of science. Let's use the language of psychology and economics to describe the value of what we do. And if I can talk to a CFO using the language of economics to describe marketing, that person's going to pay a lot more attention because I'm speaking their language. It's empathy. But the larger answer to your question is that we have come to learn, especially through mechanisms like, Facebook is this wonderful gift to all of us, just purely in terms of understanding how other humans behave. Any one of us can pretend to be an advertiser, go through that entire process of saying, all right, well, I want to market to humans. I go to Facebook, I say, I want to market in the US, men, women, age, and you segment and segment and segment, and you add likes, and then they tell you, oh, there's 1,200 people in, Coon Rapids who like this band, right? Like that ability to segment and understand populations is an awesome gift. And so we're starting to learn like why people behave the way that they behave. And the more that we can understand that, of course, the more empathetic we can be as marketers. And so behavioral economics is it's a science, it's a study, but it's a way of looking at marketing and advertising. Our job is we create something, a landing page, a search ad, a TV spot, and we hope the viewer does something. We hope that their behavior changes. One of Rory's, I'm stealing from him, but his point about creative briefing, I would argue one of the main reasons why most creative briefs suck is because the brief tries to tell you what to do. It points to a tactic. It says, ultimately, make it green, make it square, and use these words specifically in this order. It's direct. It's directive. That's a horrible brief. I mean, if that's the brief, then just go do the damn thing yourself, right? The rest of us can go play golf. But if the brief says, here is the behavior we want to change, we want someone to walk into our store. We want someone to think differently. Now we've opened it up. If the brief is about behavior, then as idea people, we can have a broader conversation about all of the factors that go into affecting that behavior. So that, in my mind, understanding that space, understanding behavioral economics and evolutionary psychology, it's one of those, like, I've been doing what I've been doing for 20 years, 25 years, and to discover, wait, there's a whole science kind of lurking underneath the things I've been sort of intuiting. Holy shit. And so that's really exciting for me, to kind of connect those dots and to learn and also to kind of, I don't know if you're like me, but if you work in marketing and advertising, it's exciting, it's thrilling, we make stuff, but to what end? And, we're not building bridges that last for centuries. We're not necessarily inventing new products, et cetera. You kind of wonder, is it lasting? And I think that discovering behavioral sciences and sort of seeing how they apply to marketing and advertising has given me a little bit more comfort to feel like, oh yeah, we are creating something of value. We are creating something that has a lasting impact.
On the topic of excitement.
Of what?
Of excitement.
Excitement, yes.
What inspires you? What other, any medium you like, but what other type of, it could be marketing, advertising, it could be other stuff.
I'm excited that all of you have decided this idea, and maybe even me, was worth getting out of bed and driving your car through horrible traffic to sit here, right? So that's exciting, and maybe that's just my ego talking. But I'm also excited about things that get made, the chance that we can make stuff. So like the only reason I built a podcast was because it was yet another excuse to make things. And by the way, I didn't have to have anyone say yes or no. I could do whatever I wanted, So the notion that we have all these tools out there, I mean, one of the amazing things about these devices is that they enable you to make stuff. Whether you want to make stuff and put it out on Instagram or Reddit or wherever, we are free now, freer to make stuff. And I love that. So to see, like my 11 and 12-year-old, I'm like, what are you watching that you're like cackling over? And usually it's Casey Neistat. But, like that they're discovering people making stuff and it amuses them. Or the fact that, my 12-year-old's been making music and some of it I really like. I'm like, that loop that you put together with that other thing that you recorded, I like that. So I'm excited about what people make and put out into the world, and the fact that there's just more of it, and that there isn't just 3 networks and a few newspapers, and we all kind of had to like wait. And if you had impulses, it was really expensive. If you were a musician or a filmmaker, in the 70s or 80s, it was hard. It was expensive to make something that other people could see. Now, there's almost too much of it. So I love the freedom of discovery. I love the newsletters and things that there's a lot of taste making that says, hey, check this out. Hey, check that out. It's when Benedict Evans, who's a VC, he's got a newsletter, or there's I can't remember the name of the guy. He's got a whole newsletter about engineering, but it's mostly about processes, and it's stuff that I do not understand it at all. But he'll point to things and say, "Hey, check this out." We'll click a link, and now all of a sudden I'm in this like electrical engineering website, and they're talking about. It's like, huh, I had no idea you could do that. So I get excited about what I can discover, and then it just goes into the big kettle of stuff in the brain that. Because part of my job is hopefully to make interesting connections, and so the more I put into the kettle, the better.
Mm-hmm. How has your work with some of these really major brands that you've been lucky enough to work with in your career influenced all your other work with maybe a smaller brand?
Well, whether it's a VW or a Volkswagen or PricewaterhouseCoopers or versus a smaller, they're all trying to achieve the same thing, which is everybody wants to receive more. They want to get back more than what they put into it. It's a simple investment scenario, right? That's what marketing is, investment. So sidebar, one of the problems that we have is that most companies look at marketing as a cost. So their default reaction to marketing is, what does it cost me? So they're coming at it from a avoid negativity, avoid risk perception. That's a big reason why most briefs suck. That's a big reason why most advertising is invisible, because they're not looking at it from an opportunity standpoint. They're not looking at it from an investment standpoint. They're looking at it from what will we lose, not what will we gain. So if you look at marketing from what will we lose, it's like, I would suggest don't bother. But if you're willing to look at it from what will we gain, now we could have an interesting conversation. And I've gone off over here and completely forgotten what you asked me.
That's fine. No, that got me where I wanted you to go.
Okay.
Talk about teaching a little bit. What are you finding? You've a couple years ago, taught that Future of Advertising class,
last fall.
made a comeback.
So teaching, simply put, what's the adage? If you want to learn something, teach it. I teach, it's selfish. I teach because I want to learn. And I would suggest that every class I've ever taught, every guest lecture I've ever done, I got more out of it, I think I got more out of it, than the students. I got perspective. In many cases, what's great about teaching is each session of a class is a premise, is a theory that you're putting out. And the students are reacting to it. And so the gift to the teacher is those reactions. Are they picking it up and grasping it and playing with it the way you thought they would? And especially if it's different than what you thought, wow, what does that mean? What are you learning? So, it's Socratic. Teaching is it's a conversation, and it's such a great gift. That's why I love it. It pays horribly, but I love a lot of it pays horribly. Scott Galloway seems to make a living out of it, but I love teaching. Is just I love it.
Is there anything that you're noticing about the new wave of marketers coming into the field from these experiences?
In the education space?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. So
the ones you're in contact with?
Oh, yeah. So let's also just say that the industry of education, what is like a $1 trillion industry in the U.S.? If you take all the for-profit schools and the subsidies that government spends on public education, et cetera, it's giant, right? It's up there with healthcare as like one of our biggest sort of pools of money, right? But education is just being massively disrupted. I mean, Capella's an early example, but MasterClass. For my birthday, my wife gave me a subscription to MasterClass. You mean to tell me I can spend 18 hours with, Spike Lee or Ron Howard to understand filmmaking? And I can watch it over and over, and I can dig down into the threads of comments of other viewers, and I can go off and check other resources. I mean, that is, and it cost me less than $100 to spend 18 hours with an Academy Award-winning film director. Holy crap. That sort of, and he's just one. I can talk to Annie Leibovitz about photography. So pick a topic. I think the structure of something like MasterClass, I don't know how they're making money, or either that or the people who are on camera are giving it away. I think that structure is only going to increase and grow. I think a lot of the bricks and mortar structure of schooling is going to make less and less sense. So I was having a conversation with a friend whose daughter graduating from high school. Should she go to one of the more expensive schools in our state, private schools? And you're looking at what is that, like $50,000, $60,000 a year? Versus, what is your daughter interested in? Well, she's interested in, music and, let's just say music and psychology. Okay. What else could you get for $60,000 a year? Let's cut it, $40,000. Let's just say mom and dad are going to spend $40,000 on their daughter a year. So get her an apartment, get her a car, pay for her health insurance. Couldn't she go do private one-on-one lessons with someone from the Minnesota Orchestra? I bet she could. I bet you to learn a lot more in a year doing that than going to a school for 4 years. Now, granted, she doesn't get the socializing, she doesn't get the networking per se, but if she really wants to become a great musician or a great psychologist, there's a different way of approach. We have so many more options now. So when education is being hugely disrupted, I think that's awesome because I think it forces the existing players to deliver greater value or lose.
Mm-hmm. What you want to talk a little bit about UCare, what you're doing now?
Oh, I'm just very fortunate that nice people thought I was smart enough to be given a contracting job, working with a bunch of smart people at U. So we're helping them refresh their brand. They have a new logo, a new tagline, new campaign, and it's. So I've been on the agency side for 25 years and got laid off in February, and just because of the world and circumstances, it occurred to me that hey, maybe I should think about moving client side. So I've been, interviewing for roles. By the way, I've been rejected 12 times for jobs I've applied for, interviewed for, since March 1st. So it's out there. It happens. And it's been interesting to kind of learn from that and get perspective and sort of get a sense of, what are people looking for and what can I learn from each no. But I've been fortunate and very grateful that I've had an opportunity to contract with those people and learn about being a client, learn about what are agencies looking for and what can I facilitate. It's work.
You think you'll stick client side for a while?
Maybe.
Pretty big shift.
We'll see. It sort of depends on, what are the offers out there and how does life line up. Again, going back to the business and the system that we work in. So at the end of the day, marketing, advertising, we make stuff. We ship products. We ship brochures. We ship event experiences. We ship search campaigns and TV ads and social media content. I'm less worried about the stuff once it's exiting the door and being optimized. I'm more interested in what's the culture, what's the system that generates that fuels that supports it, that guides it. That's where I think getting that to be smarter, better, faster is kind of where the opportunity lies. And if that's at an agency, so be it. If it's client side, great.
Sure. I want to hear from anyone who wants to ask questions at this point. What haven't we covered? What do you want to hear from Tim? Could be anything. It doesn't have to be marketing, advertising related. You want to?
Yeah. Well, no, we've got a question already from Twitter.
Okay.
Ooh, Twitter.
Let's start with that.
All right. So Phil wants to know, what is the future of Facebook, Twitter, and YouTube?
Start with an easy one.
Facebook, Twitter. Well, go watch. Where's the camera? You over there. Go and watch Scott Galloway's The Four Horsemen. Go to YouTube. It's the DLD conference. Scott Galloway. He teaches at NYU, the Stern School of Music. Stern School of Business, not music. He does an assessment of Google, Facebook, Amazon, etc. I would consider YouTube and Google to kind of be one and the same. His assessment of where they're going and tracking is deep, nuanced, really smart, and anything I say would just be stolen from him. So that I would go to that resource because he's done an analysis in 2015, 16, 17, and I think they're doing one soon. So that continuity will teach you more than I could. You had that young lady there. You had a question
in the middle there, Patrick.
I appreciate the young lady comment. Thank you. You mentioned, Tim, some of the resources that you go to every day to be inspired, newsletters about patents and art. But just real tactically, do you have any favorite podcasts or blogs that you go to every week or every day? Or any good books you read recently that you'd recommend?
Well, the Sapiens book. So I'm one of those people, someone says, hey, here's a good book. I'm on Amazon, it's purchased, and then 2 days later it shows up in a cardboard box, and I'm like, what is this? Oh, it's that book. there's a stack. It's 3 feet high of books I haven't read that I need to. A lot of them are about behavioral stuff. The Sapiens book that I read I thought was really informative. You know, I try to read books that are in spaces that I don't know. I just picked up Ken Auletta's book about frenemies because it was recommended. Maybe I'll dive into it. So newsletters. When I was teaching at MCAD, one of the requirements of the students was, here are 5 newsletters. You have to read them. Some of them are daily, like the Calacanis launch ticker. It's just more of a quick scan, like 30 seconds of like, oh, more than anything, it's a feeling of, wow, there is a lot happening in the world in terms of technology. 99% of it's like I just gloss over, but every once in a while I'm like, huh, that's interesting. That seems applicable to my world. Benedict Evans is a VC at Andreessen Horowitz. He has a good podcast, a newsletter. I'll tweet a bunch of them out over the next day or two, because of course my brain's going like, I'm not going to tell you what they are. You ever have that? You're talking to someone and you're like, literally, it's like, okay, something inside my brain decided to go take the thing I need to tell you and hide it, and it's just not fair. Yeah, so we'll tweet some stuff out there. Different podcasts. I'm a drummer, so I mostly listen to drumming podcasts. I like Bob Lefsitz's podcast. You know, I'm interested, and it's not technique. It's not like, well, what symbols do you use? It's more, who are you as a human? So I'm more interested in podcasts where we're trying to get a sense of like, what were your parents like? How were you raised as a kid? How does that affect who you are today? That's the kind of stuff I'm interested in. You had a question in the back?
Hi, Tim, thanks. I'm glad that you referenced a story you wrote. Check it on Medium,
Yeah.
Wonderful source. I'm curious how that works for you. And then a second part of that question is, whatever happened to Tumblr, and does anybody use that anymore?
Yeah, like, I had a friend who had some stock in that, I wonder. Tumblr, I couldn't tell you other than it sounds like there was a vision for something. Other people saw it as a pile of money and grabbed it, and, you know, maybe it'll reemerge Phoenix-like as something else, right? Is CARP even still there? The technology, the underlying technology and kind of the UX of it is distinct, and, you know, it's its own thing. It's a style, a way of communicating. Will that prevail? It needs vision, you know. I think Tumblr just is, I would suggest whoever owns it needs to look into why do people still use it and how can you amplify that. Yes, Medium, you know, it's just an awesome place to go and kind of just scan for interesting stuff and sometimes search if you're looking for things. Here's the thing about me and creating and blogging. I don't look at the analytics. So I had a blog. It had GA attached to it. I think I looked at that once. Medium tells you, you know, like, hey, people are reading your stuff. Okay. So I write because I want to. I write because I'm exercising, I'm exiting some demon, something that's just stuck here and needs to get out. If you read it and get something from it, fantastic. That's awesome. I've comments and tracking, like I market solely for my own pleasure, right? I write and create solely because I want to. Unlike, say, when you get paid to do something, I care very deeply about how it's assessed and evaluated. But any of the blogging that I do is just purely for me doing it because I want to. And Medium's great just as an author. It's a beautiful platform to create in. Yeah, there's that.
Hi, Tim. My name's Kathy.
Hi, Kathy.
I'm curious about your UCare contract position.
Yeah.
And the reason I am is healthcare is just getting into marketing and advertising more and starting to think more like a business. Knowing a little bit about healthcare, they're a unique company with their culture. Their target market, I believe, is multicultural and very low-income people. And coming in there, what behavior change do they want? How are you going about it? And how is it different than what you might have done in a company outside of healthcare?
Okay. I'm now thinking of our PR team and the compliance people going, don't say anything. So I can answer you only through the lens of I'm a freelance contractor, I'm not an actual employee, so what I'm saying is my opinion and not the words of that company. Yeah, so there, you know, we're in the backyard of a $200 billion healthcare insurance company. I think UCare is maybe a $3 billion company somewhere, so relatively smaller. And yeah, they're a nonprofit. I would suggest the focus, you know, they were born out of an initiative at the University of Minnesota to serve underprivileged populations. That is not their sole focus anymore. Interestingly enough, before I started working there, you know, I got laid off. Hey, I got to find an insurance policy. I have a UCare policy under the individual and family plans. And then it's like, now all of a sudden I'm working there. That's odd. But to kind of the root of what you're asking, the first step was kind of understanding who are we currently serving, what's working there, who could we be serving, and how do we understand those behaviors. So there's lots of conversations about audiences and members. Their primary purpose is to grow their membership, right, to serve more people. So who are we serving well? Who you know, you're talking about health insurance. I'd argue none of us are going to raise our hands and say, oh, I love my health insurance. I love my provider. I have a 17-month-old, we have a 17-month-old who has special needs. The volumes of paperwork we've been dealing with at home around health insurance have been painful. So, you know, I think that the way forward for us is understanding our customers as best we can and trying to figure out operationally what are we doing right, operationally what can we fix, and from a marketing standpoint, it's recognizing that we're not going to speak to everybody. We're going to speak to a small group, and how do we say the fewest possible words to attract the most amount of people. So it's a lot of conversations, a lot of trials, a lot of prototypes to build a system that delivers on that. I don't know if I answered your question, but it's also politically I really can't. Yeah, no, UCare, they health plans for you, me, and everybody. I mean, their biggest bulk is states and Medicaid, and then they do a lot of Medicare. You know, if you think this fall is going to be about political advertising, yes, it will be, but it will also be about Medicare advertising. There's some big shifts happening that we will all hear about because people are going to spend money for us to hear about it.
Yep. A couple follow-up comments and then a question for you. Yahoo was the one that bought Tumblr for about $1.1 billion, of which they've acknowledged that they didn't understand it.
Yeah.
The other thing about Medium, the writing platform, a lot of people don't realize that they actually have a partner program, which I'm a part of. I pay $5 per month, but it monetizes all of your actual ability to, as a writer, to be paid. I mean, I've cross-posted articles from my website, and it's paid for my about 2 years or 3 years worth of that $5 fee. But that $5 fee actually goes to all the writers. So when you applaud somebody as a writer, a percentage of all of your applauses on a per month basis goes to the actual writers on the platform. So it's a great way as a writer to actually supplement or actually, and I know writers that have made $5,000, $6,000, $7,000 a month just from their writing.
Wow.
The other question is Instagram just rolled out IGTV last week. What are your thoughts on video platforms as a marketer, especially IGTV, as compared to YouTube?
So Instagram is, you know, top 1 or 2 kind of like, it's the, I'm in line, I have time to kill, Instagram. You know, what a wonderfully addictive platform. I think that the TV side of it, it's an experiment. Like, we'll see. Will we collectively have the patience and the interest to watch longer than 60 seconds doing this. You know, like that's a bet to some degree against Netflix and others. You know, like, hey, if you're going to spend time staring at this thing in your hand, spend it looking at our stuff versus their stuff. And it'll be interesting to see, like, are there any breakout, like you and I aren't going to get a show on Netflix necessarily, right? Certainly we can put stuff on YouTube, but, you know, it's a pebble in a pond, right? It's a grain of sand on the beach. So it'll be interesting to see if individual contributors, individual creators are able to flourish better on Instagram versus YouTube. I think that's what's actually happening there is, you know, it's the democratization of video content. You know, again, in the 70s, you or I weren't going to get on TV. We weren't going to have a show. We weren't going to make a movie. But today, you know, you or I can put very high quality content on YouTube, and if we're lucky, if enough people find us, we can have relatively good success, especially on YouTube. Maybe now that'll happen on Instagram. We'll see how it folds out. It goes to an interesting point. You know, you talk about making money as a writer. One of the things I love about the world that we're in, and this is an example that I'm stealing it from Seth Godin. He talked about if you were really into, I think it's Lamborghinis, how would you know if a Lamborghini, like you know, from like 1980 or 1990 was available for sale? You know, before the internet, you couldn't. Well, there was a guy who was just really into Lamborghinis, and he would write letters to the DMVs at every state and receive back the sales list, because it's public data of cars being traded, and then he would aggregate it, and he was the guy who had the database, and he started in like the late 60s. And then you could subscribe to his mimeographed newsletter that would track every Lamborghini being bought or sold in the United States. And we're talking about like very few transactions. You know, it's a few hundred a year, maybe. But he was charging something like $600 a year to receive this mimeographed newsletter. Well, at $600 a year, you know, what if you have 1,000 subscribers? Ooh. And all you're doing is aggregating data and publishing something? Like, that's pretty amazing. And this, you know, now, of course, it's automated, it's you know, it's a website, it's a subscription model. But the point is, it's very easy for an individual to get passionate in a very niche area. And if it's of value to enough people, you can make money. So to me, when I look at Instagram TV, it's like, if I've got a really unique point of view, and I know that I can make not one piece of content, but hundreds of pieces of content, and they'll all be of relatively good quality, the fact that Instagram will enable me to target an audience, that's awesome. And so I'm excited about the idea that any one of us could become, quote, a star, but really you're talking about you're becoming a successful publisher in that platform. That's what's cool about YouTube. That's what, in my mind, that's what's cool about IGTV is what it will enable. Whether or not, you know, and brands are sort of on equal footing there in the sense of, if you're a brand and you're going to go, okay, we're really going to dive into IGTV, that requires a heck of a lot of commitment to deliver consistently over time, episode after episode after episode, and maintain that community. Most won't. Most will go, it's too much work, and they won't be able to justify the return on it. But I'm interested about that stuff, yeah.
I think we have time for one more question.
Yeah.
Yes.
So I couldn't have asked for a better segue here. Speaking of ideas that excite, what is one of the most recent ideas, concepts, campaigns, et cetera, that really engaged, affected, or inspired you?
Oh yeah, you were asking about things that engage and inspire. Honestly, there really isn't anything within the realm of social media and the construct that we're talking about that the challenge with social media is it's not about the one individual thing that got made, it's about the stream of things that got made over and over. And it's really about, hey, were you able to consistently deliver for a year, 2 years, 5 years, you know, like over and over and over. So, and that's a marathon, right? to me, the real winners in the social space aren't the one-hit wonders that like, hey, we did something around the Super Bowl and hooray for us, that one tweet, that one post. It's more who can consistently develop a community over time, and that's why you come here for case studies next month. When I look at things that interest me, so Con just happened. What a valuable, the fact that all of us can go to the Cons winners website or go to Adweek because they've aggregated it and get examples, that's exciting. There's some, I think it won a couple of Grand Prix, the Trash Island. So the idea that there's as much plastic trash in our oceans to equal the geographical mass of France, 3 feet deep. That much trash is floating in our oceans. So the idea that like, hey, let's make it a country. Let's give it a flag. Let's give it passports. And therefore we have responsibility for it. I loved that idea. That got me to kind of go, I hadn't thought about waste and trash and recycling that way before, so I liked that idea. There was a mobile app out of, I think, Colombia. So Colombia, not a corrupt place at all, or maybe it was Brazil, right? But they've got elections, and this agency built a thing called a corruption detector. Again, it's mobile phones. The idea was point the app at, if a politician is talking on TV, on a website, on a billboard, point your phone at them using facial recognition, so it recognizes, oh, that's candidate X. It then scrubs a database of the court systems, where was it? Brazil or Colombia, I can't remember. But anyway, it scrubs the legal database to go, oh, that candidate has been charged with 16 felonies, right? Because it's no politician is going to tell you that they've done something bad. And the trouble in Colombia and Brazil is that most of them have, but you don't, how do you know? So the idea that we can instantly enable you to go, oh, that candidate is really corrupt. I thought that was an interesting use of utility and mobile stuff. But I typically go to, things like a con as a way of reminding myself that great effort does occur, and what can you learn from them to kind of inspire the work that you're doing day to day.
I think that's a great place to end. Tim will be around. If you have more questions for him, you can hit him up online. He has a chat bot.
Yeah, I have a chat bot because some friends of mine built it for me as a joke. And so thank you, Marty and Jake and Greg and Joseph. You guys were very kind. But yeah, and that's another thing to just kind of experiment with. So why does it exist? Why not? And it's a place to experiment. It's a place to kind of try and see, well, I wonder how this works and what could I make with it. The particular chatbot is really, it's deep in the subject of The Big Lebowski. So if you know that movie, you could ask it questions and it will probably respond to you more so than other topics.
Good to know. Let's give Tim a thank you, round of applause
for
joining us.
It's a great honor to be here. Thank you all very much.
Hope to see you next month, and have a great rest of the day.
This is Gabe. Thanks for watching. Come join us at Social Media Breakfast next month. This summer we'll be doing Thursdays, also live streaming on this channel. So subscribe if you want to be able to automatically get notified when we're going to be up. And if you guys ever want to see more of the videos, we also do them on Facebook. Facebook Skelly Video Productions. Hope you guys are having a great Thursday and enjoy the rest of your week. Happy Social Media Breakfast.